Hello and welcome to today's Get Together session brought to you by getAbstract. My name is Michael. I'm executive editor at getAbstract and responsible for getAbstract's new magazine called Journal. You can find the Journal by getAbstract on journal.getabstract.com. Today our topic will be how to recover our creative confidence. And luckily I'm not going to talk about this alone, but with a guest. And I'm proud to have a guest here today from Geneva, Switzerland, who is Anja Wyden Guelpa. Anja is founder of CivicLab, a think tank and a consulting firm based in Geneva in Switzerland. And when talking about our new journal, that's a perfect keyword because Anja is also a columnist for our new journal. Welcome to the show, Anja.
Hi, Michael. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fine, and actually it's a rainy day in Switzerland, and I'm very keen on talking about a brightening topic today. And I think how to recover our creative confidence is a perfect topic for a rainy day in Switzerland. So I just wanted to mention that besides writing for getAbstract and managing your company, you're also an independent board member of corporate boards, chairwoman of several foundations, and you teach innovation, design thinking, and political communication at the universities of Lausanne and Geneva. That's good for our topic today, because our topic today will be all about innovation. And many companies and organizations actually struggle with innovation, even after the pandemic, and especially after the pandemic, which is very, very challenging. And when it comes to innovate, according to you, the loss of creative confidence is one of the main obstacles to get to an innovative state of mind, to innovate, to be competitive. And before we talk about how to find it, that creative confidence, I would like to talk about what that actually means. What is that creative confidence?
Yeah, Michael, as you said, the majority of organizations and most of us actually, we struggle with innovation. The McKinsey Global Innovation Survey showed that 84% of executives consider that their business model are at risk and that innovation is crucial for their survival. Only 6% of them are happy and satisfied with their own transformational strategy. So innovation is important for all of us, and not only for the private sector, as well for the public sector, where it is to adapt the education system to the new needs, digitalize public services in order to be more efficient or function during a COVID crisis, or maybe even to change the corporate culture of a police department and fight racism. So we all struggle with innovation, and most of the time, it's not a technical issue at all, because it's much more related to the mindset or to the corporate culture. We struggle because we think we are not creative and we are afraid of taking risk. And we all know there is no innovation without risk taking.
Yeah, that's well put. So just to rephrase it, we think of ourselves that we are not creatives. So that's why it leads to a lack of innovative ideas, right? But where does that fear actually come from? You mentioned corporate culture as one of those obstacles. But if that's right, that corporate cultures lead to a lack of creative confidence, it must have been there in the first place, right? It was there. So where does it come from, and how does it get lost?
Yeah. As kids, we were not afraid. The sky was the limit. We were very creative. We wanted to go to the moon or develop a drug to cure cancer. The problem most of the time starts around maybe 10 years, 8, 9, 10 years, because we start to care about what others think. Some of us even get our lids shut by maybe our professor that thinks, oh, your drawing is not the way it should be. And we start avoiding to expose our creations, and our saboteur is born. You know, that little nasty voice, which is sitting on your shoulder and spitting on your plate. And
yes,
the problem
I think most
is
of us
that
know.
most of us know, you know, that little voice that says, yes, I mean, your speech will be a disaster. And why in the first place did you wanted to write a column and no one is interested in what you're saying? And yeah, I mean, and the problem is that little nasty beast is a loyal companion. Most of us, we have him the whole life.
Yeah, most of us know that little saboteur or nasty saboteur, as you put it. But yeah, we often would like to get rid of this saboteur. But didn't that guy also save us from disaster from time to time? I mean, self-reflection and concern about our own behavior or about the quality of our work, they also play an important role when it comes to self-improvement, right? So completely getting rid of that guy wouldn't actually do all good. Is that right?
Exactly. Our saboteur saved us when we were a child. That's for sure. For example, there are different saboteurs. Let's take the controller, which is a quite common saboteur. So people need to have control over their lives and often also over someone else's lives. And very often that saboteur is really related to your early childhood, when a child was forced to grow up very fast, when a child had to take charge for their parents or a chaotic or maybe dangerous surrounding. And that behavior saved that child in that situation. But today, that behavior or that saboteur is holding you back and pushing people away.
So if I get that right, you say that we have a choice today. Maybe as a child, we had no choice, but today we can, regardless of the corporate culture we come to later, change ourselves. Maybe get rid of that nasty little saboteur when it's useful, if it hinders us instead of helping us. Is that right?
Yes.
So okay, I'm going to take my notebook, and you can tell me how. Actually, taking notes now.
In order to get rid of your saboteur, or at least most of the time we can't get rid totally, but just to live better, in a better companionship with him, is to identify your saboteur. And because there are different ones, there are controllers, there are overachievers, there are a whole bunch of saboteurs out there. And you can work with a coach, that's possible. You can also start with an online assessment. There is, for example, an online assessment for free on positiveintelligence.com. It's a Stanford professor who is researching around that. And then you have to name your saboteur, or sometimes there are several saboteurs. And some people actually give them a name. So it's a person or a thing or a monster. And once you did that first work, when your saboteurs start to talk, it's not yourself anymore. And it's not the truth anymore. You can just say, oh, my saboteur is awake. Yeah, he must be afraid. Okay. And you can just tell him very gently to, let's stay polite, to leave and to leave you alone. And when we've told that saboteur to leave, or when we get him a little bit further from us, then we can start really to try to work on the recovery of our creative confidence. And for that, for me, there are three different things that play a big role. The first one is resilience, second, inspiration, and the third one, persistence. So if you're okay, let's start with resilience. So resilience.
Yes, but I would really like to know before we move on, what names do your personal saboteurs actually have? Do you give those saboteurs names?
I have one name, yes. It's well, it's not a personal name. It's called the cabin. Yeah.
What is it about? Can you tell me? I would really like to know.
Yeah, it's a story of when I was a child, and not a very nice story. And so for me, that's kind of, you know, that symbolizes all these fears which were kept in a cabin, and so that helps me to just push them gently away. It's part of my past, but it's not me anymore. It's not there to hold myself back anymore. Yeah.
Okay, that's
But
really good
it's
to know.
different
You
for
want to
everyone.
start with resilience.
Yeah, resilience.
Sure,
So
sure.
the
Everyone
very
is
first thing for me,
resilience.
yeah, resilience, the first thing is really to choose. You have to choose that you want to change. You have to choose that you want to recover your creative confidence. We all know these people, you know, they complain the whole day, the whole week that they would like to do something, or they would like to stop a bad habit like smoking or whatever, and they never do. And that's because actually their situation, the fact to be stuck, which doesn't seem to be comfortable, but they must find some comfort in that. At least they prefer that to the painful change they should do. So that first decision is really very important. Let me give a personal example here, maybe. A couple of years ago, I really hated public speaking, and I avoided it as much as I could, which wasn't very easy because I was a state chancellor, so I was a member of a regional government in Switzerland. So as a politician, I was supposed to do a lot of speeches. And there was one day, probably I was 42 or something like that, where I decided that I wanted to change that. I decided that I was old enough to get rid of that feeling that I'm not enough, that no one wants to hear what I have to say, that I don't have to say anything anyway. And then I started to work on it. Then you can take a coach and work in that and force yourself to public speaking. But it was really that first decision, okay, this year, that will change. And it's not only I will get better in that, but my goal, my personal goal was I want to start to enjoy public speaking. And then you can start. If you're just there, yeah, I would like, but I don't want, that's not really working.
But you also have to make sure that you know that there are going to be, you're going to make mistakes, you're going to fail at some point. It's going to be hard, right? Learning is not always a pleasure. So maybe that leads to the next point. How do you deal with failing or with failure in general? I mean, you have to have a habit to deal with that.
Exactly. So here, like in design thinking, like in other approaches, innovation approaches, it's really the celebrate failure. Force yourself to celebrate failure, to laugh about yourself, to laugh about the result, even if you had a very difficult experience, just take some distance to it. And this culture of failure and also culture of learning from difficulties, we often see that that's very, very present in corporate cultures, in companies where lives are at risk. For example, in hospitals or in the aviation sector, where it's really necessary to open up what goes wrong and to understand in order to make sure that it doesn't happen again. So that's really important. And then the last point for me in resilience is really to ask help, to ask for help. I mean, once you have decided, once you're on your way, you don't have to do it alone. You can have creative experts, you can have books, there are coaches, workshops, to find other people who want to do the same journey and to do it together. That makes it really easier.
Yes, and that's a good keyword. We both live in Switzerland. You're Swiss, I'm not, but I know that Switzerland is quite proud of and famous for its perfectionism in many things, right? When it comes to watches, when it comes to chocolate making and everything. And that already defines some kind of corporate culture, right? That's part of the deal. It's part of everything you sell or many things you sell in Switzerland. But if I get you right, it could be useful to get rid of this perfectionism to be ready to innovate. Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah, perfectionism is poison for creativity. Our perfectionism makes us think that our first draft has to be perfect, but then it's not a draft anymore. So our perfectionism holds us from major creations and fulfillment. And just ask yourself now, what would you do if you weren't afraid? What would you dare if it hadn't to be perfect? And if you really do that, you suddenly find things that your mind weren't just not going there because you were afraid. And the other thing is also very often when we are afraid, we are concentrated on mistakes, avoiding mistakes. And while you're avoiding mistakes, you're not shooting for excellence. You're not going for the moon. Where maybe you don't land on the moon, but at least you land between the stars. So that's not bad. But we are often so attached to fears, and then if it's like when you don't think about a pink elephant, it's not possible. You will think about a pink elephant. So if you think about everything that could go wrong, well, then it might.
Mm-hmm. So, but let's say you yourself, you really got to terms when it comes to get rid of those perfectionist mindsets. But when working in company, in a team, in a special corporate culture, you may still be surrounded by perfectionists, right? And that might end up in not innovating because the whole surrounding and everything surrounding you just forces you to get back on that perfectionist track. If I get you right, it would be more useful to have some kind of environment of improvement through failure accompanied by a help network that is more decent and doesn't really aim for perfectionism. Is that right? And if so, how can you just convince your team members and the surrounding people, everyone in your company, that maybe you are doing something wrong when everyone thinks we are just aiming for the right goal and we're doing it right, and that's our thing, how we do it? I mean, that's pretty challenging.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole point of change management, and that's also what happens quite often when people go to a workshop or do some work on themselves. They're very motivated, they want to change everything, and then they come back into their normal environment and things just fade out and there's not much that lasts. Sometimes it's even worse because they think, oh, I tried and it didn't work. So of course it's always easier if management, if people in power are with you, and if they really try to bring a corporate culture that helps. But you always have an impact on whatever role you have in a company. The sheer fact that you are acting differently will have an impact on the people around you. So, or there are also things like guerrilla innovation, which I really believe in. So rather than asking always permission, sometimes just do it. And once you show things to people, it's much easier to convince them than just with words or just with a concept. And but it's not easy. It's not easy to build really a corporate culture that favors innovation, and it's not easy to keep it even once you're there. It's like a marriage. It's not enough to find a good person. Then you have to work on it. It's hard work.
Mm-hmm. That leads us directly to your next point you mentioned in the beginning, right? So to keep that inspirational flow running, the next point is inspiration. So how can inspiration help to increase creative confidence, especially in a surrounding, in a team where maybe inspiration was not one of those key factors everyone was thinking about?
Yeah. For the start, I would like to say I'm really convinced that we are all creative, even if we think we are not. We are all creative, we are all whole, and we are all resourceful. That's for sure. And sometimes it's just that the external conditions shut that a little bit down. So what helps, in my opinion, for inspiration is really to try to see what is around us, to take time to nurture our creativity in a sense. So most people then tell me, oh, well, yeah, I don't have time. I have so much on my plate. And well, time management is a whole other subject. We could talk about it for an hour. But that's an excuse. I mean, time is just reflecting priorities. So if someone decided, first point, choose to increase their creativity, then they will find time. You can just reduce your social media, you can reduce your media consumption for some time, and then you will find time for that. And so inspiration for me, I would say in three different dimensions. First one is art, second is movement, and third one is nature. So art is quite obvious, as we were talking about creativity. Artists are people who are trained to feel the space, to feel what is happening in the world, to hear the weak signals, to see the small changes that will become a big wave, a disruptive wave or something. And in addition to that sensory, artists are also trained to create something new with what they felt and what is within them. So that to hear inside and to hear outside. And to be around that process, which is very, very near also to the design thinking process, where you have empathy, define your problem, to ideate, find most possibilities, solutions that you can have without judgment, without criticizing them, prototype and test. And so being around these communities and these people, and also simply confront yourself to art can already heal part of your inner child who was creative and one day decided that you're not creative anymore. And the second one is quite obvious as well. Most of us know it, and hopefully most of us have adapted good habits in that field, is movement. To do movement, to do sports that relaxes your mind, which allows you to be more creative, to be more effective, productive as well. And that helps you also to stop turnaround problems that you might have, to concentrate on what you're doing. And really recent research shows that doing regularly sports really increases your capacity of being creative. And the last point is really nature. A very easy one, and I hope that COVID also helped us to be a bit, maybe a bit more in nature, and to go less far for holidays, and maybe seek more pleasure in the surroundings. And here is really spending time in nature brings us back to the essential things. It kind of divides what is noise and what is really your inner voice, what is there to tell you. And sometimes also what can be very helpful if your creative source is kind of stuck, is to really take 24 hours or a week if you can, but at least 24 hours, no talking, no reading, no watching screens at all. That's a bit extreme, but it's very, very helpful. And nature has an incredible effect. It's kind of a balancing effect. So people who are hyperactive, nature calms them down, and people who are kind of too apathic, nature stimulates them. And there are researchers at the moment in the US with veterans, PTSD veterans, post-traumatic experiences, and they seem to show that after 3 days in nature, you can actually measure the impact. So people are calmer, less depression, less anxiety, better performance, and more creativity. And that's quite magical. So I try to be there as much as possible.
Yes, that somehow corresponds to my own experiences when I was in charge of a bunch of journalists in the former place where I worked. We usually, for once a year, we went out into the Swiss mountains to do digital detox, because there was no mobile phone coverage in the mountains. We were moving. We had our backpacks and everything we wanted to eat for 3 days in our backpacks, and we hiked up a mountain for around 4 hours to find a cabin somewhere where there was no one there, was not guarded. We had to do everything on our own. and we spent 2 to 3 days in wilderness to get our heads free and to be creative. And in fact, that really led to some of our best solutions we came up with for problems we had when we faced. So that was an innovative process. There was nothing to distract us there. We were moving, we were having fun. It was completely calm up there. So that's just one evidence that this works, and you can actually combine all these 3 steps on a maybe a 1 day or 2 day journey if you don't have that much time.
But more is better. More is better. I will take my clients for 4 days this summer in August to do hiking in silence, yoga, exercises on being clear on their next challenges, and nature as well, and art.
So let's say a company wants to adjust its culture to your suggestion, or match these steps, do these steps, and take action. What is key in the process? You are dealing with a lot of companies, advising them. What are your best practices in this process?
Yeah, in every company when I start to work with them and they tell me, oh, we want to be more innovative and please help us to make these people more innovative, I always try to start, I always start and tell them to start with the problems that people actually have. Because if you just keep, whether it's saboteurs or tensions or aggressivity, or if you keep the problems there and you just tell people be creative, which is in itself doesn't work, then it gets just worse, because then people are just there. They don't want to go there, and for them it's just another gimmick from their bosses. So really try to start with that healing. That sounds a bit silly, but it's really to help people to recover their forces and to be less weighted by problems. And then also to help them to get into a good feedback habit, because in a early creative stage, negative feedback or harsh feedback can be very destroying. On the other side, you need a lot of feedback in the creative process. More people you have, the more opinions you have, the richer will be your results. So really to help them to find that balance in giving feedback, which is not criticizing, it's just giving a vision, and that feedback is a gift actually, but you have to learn how to do it. And the second thing I would say is really to try to help a company to hear all the voices and not only the corner office voices. That's often a problem, especially in big companies, that the people who decide or define the strategy, they talk to some people and they know a lot of things, but they don't know everything. And so really to bring the culture to a point where every employee, whatever status he has, is able actually to dare and to express his doubts or his ideas without fear of being judged, and knowing that he will be taken seriously. That's a big deal as well. On the other hand, to build strong teams, to hire more smarter people than yourself, flexibility, open communication, of course, acceptance of risk and mistakes, failure. We talked about that. That is very, very important. And if I would have to summarize it, I would say give your employees autonomy, recognition, not with money, but real recognition, and a common sense of purpose. I think these are really the cornerstones for corporate culture, which can be in favor of innovation.
You mentioned it before that when it comes to succeeding in this process, the last but not least step to take is to be persistent, right? So what does that mean in concrete terms?
Well, do your part of the job. Inspiration is great, but then it's also work and consistency, and that hasn't necessarily have to be painful. Sometimes we imagine if something is easy, well, then it was too easy, and then it's not good, it's not great. And we shouldn't feel guilty when something great comes out naturally and effortless to us. But most of the time, we just need to stick to the work, stick to the process, and do it every day.
So what is, if I would ask you about some kind of baby step one can take today to start that improvement, what would that be?
That's a very important thing. I always stop with that, whether it's with coaching clients or with workshops, because when people have great ideas and then they go home and then other stuff is coming up, and then a week is passed, and then a month is passed. So always to say, what are you doing now? What are you doing tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock in the morning? So in that process, it can be, if the person decided, I want to work on that, I want to recover my creative confidence, the first step might be have a coffee with an expert in that field. Or that might be to read a book in that field. That might be to watch a TED Talk in that field. So whatever. And leaders and organizations do not always encourage out-of-the-box thinking, unfortunately, because as managers, we are trained to decide quickly. We have to, in order to decide quickly, we have to eliminate as soon as possible all possibilities that we don't need, and sometimes that a bit negative attitude from managers towards innovation, towards out-of-the-box thinking is humanly quite understandable, because if you are a manager, you work 75 hours a week, you have 3.5 hours sleep left, and someone comes with an idea which is outside of what you're doing, then the reaction might be, oh, I need my 3.5 hours of sleep, and so that's really not, that's what often happens, and so these possibilities don't get the space and don't get the attention that we need, because the mindset of innovation is not narrowing the possibilities and find as soon as possible the right answer. It's the whole opposite. It's to really leave all the possibilities open and be open to feedback from our customers, from our users, and not what you think was your experience and everything that you have. And that's the way things are. At least that's my vision of things. So I think that change is the natural state of things, and even though we don't have all the same external conditions, but we are all creative, whole, and resourceful. And I think no matter how injured our creative child has been, no matter how old we are today, we can recover. And but we need to choose it. We need to create a support system around for healing and resilience, take time for inspiration in nature, movement, and art, and then be persistent and patient with ourselves, and to nurture. It's like a little seed and becomes a little plant, and then it becomes a huge tree. And that's the change, that's the growth that I want to see in clients. So they, not just because then they're happier, because then they're able to achieve their goals and create the world that we want to live in, right?
Yeah, I totally agree. I must say that already a contact on my side. So we're coming to the end of today's session because time's up. Thank you very much, Anja. I think there were a whole lot of takeaways from the last 25 to 30 minutes. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for your time. Thank you for writing the column. So everyone's watching. Thanks for watching too, and make sure you read the upcoming columns that are exactly dealing with the topic of today and going into more detail on how to create that creative culture at your own organization and in your own four walls at home, wherever you need to be creative. Thank you, Anja.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Yes, and that's it for today. Stay safe, everyone, and tune back in for our upcoming get-togethers. Thanks for watching. Goodbye, and good luck when recreating your creative confidence.
Bye.